New evidence and testimony, on Wednesday, shocked the Murdaugh family members, in attendance, and poked large, damning holes in Alex Murdaugh's alibi, and statements to police about his whereabouts on the night of the 7th of June 2021, when we are told, Paul and Maggie Murdaugh were killed. In court earlier in the day, the state offered into evidence a cell phone video taken around 8:40, on Paul Murdaugh's phone. In the video are images of a dog, and 3 voices. Paul's best friend, Rogan Gibson, took the stand, and testified that he was 100% sure that the voices belonged to Paul, Maggie, and Alex Murdaugh, on the night of the killings. He had previously identified the voices during a SLED interview, in November of 2022. Did you recognize the voices of your second family, Paul, Maggie, and Alex Murdaugh? Asked Creighton Waters, lead prosecutor, for the SC Attorney General's office. Gibson responded, "I'm positive." Earlier, prosecutors had offered evidence and testimony, indicating that Paul and Maggie's cell phones had stopped all meaningful activity around 8:49 p.m., believing that is when they were shot and killed. This video evidence puts Murdaugh in a place he says he never was, at a time he said he was not present. Murdaugh had told 911 operators and SLED investigators previously that the last time he had seen his wife was roughly 2 hours before the killings, on November 14, 2022. His attorneys filed a motion of alibi defense, claiming that he was not present at the time of the killings. The video evidence, and Gibson's testimony, shreds that alibi, and those previous statements to authorities. Defendant Richard Alexander was not present at the time, place, and date of the murders of his wife Maggie and son Paul. Because he was not present, Murdaugh does not know the time the murders were committed. Murdaugh was on the Moselle property from some time prior to 8:30 p.m. on June 7, 2021, until a few minutes after 9 p.m., when he left to visit his mother at 115 Almeida Place, Varnville, South Carolina. Maggie and Paul were alive the last time he saw them, before leaving for Almeida. During the drive to Almeida, Murdaugh had cell phone conversations with his son Buster Murdaugh, his brother John Marvin Murdaugh, his sister-in-law, Liz Murdaugh, Chris Wilson, and C.B. Rowe. Murdaugh arrived at Almeida at approximately 9:20 p.m. He visited with his mother, Elizabeth Libby Murdaugh, and a nurse's aide, Michelle Shelley Smith. Murdaugh stayed with his mother until approximately 9:45 p.m., and then returned to Moselle, arriving at approximately 10 p.m. On the return trip to Moselle, Murdaugh spoke with Chris Wilson via cell phone. Murdaugh discovered Maggie and Paul's bodies at approximately 10:05 p.m. During cross-examination, Murdaugh defense attorney Jim Griffin asked Gibson questions about the Murdaugh family's relationship, painting the picture of a family man unlikely to harm his loved ones. But during cross-examination, Griffin also opened the door to a different legal matter that Judge Clifton Newman has yet to rule admissible: the fatal boat crash of 2019, involving Paul Murdaugh as the alleged driver. Griffin had asked if Gibson was aware of a wrongful death lawsuit against Murdaugh that stemmed from the crash, and if Paul had received threats related to that case. However, Murdaugh's legal team had previously filed a motion to exclude any testimony or evidence related to the crash, which Newman has yet to rule on, but now that door was open, and Waters took full advantage. When Will Loving, another close friend of Paul's, took the stand, Waters asked why the Murdaughs had sold their house in Hampton. When Will Loving responded that he heard through the grapevine that they had sold it to pay some debts and cover some lawsuits, Griffin objected, and the judge sustained the objection due to hearsay. But Waters wasn't done, asking Will Loving, "Did you know anything about Murdaugh being confronted, on the morning of June 7, 2021, about $792,000 of missing legal fees?" Loving replied no, over Griffin's objection, which was overruled. Will Loving also testified that he recognized one of the voices on Paul's videos as being Alex Murdaugh's voice. He also testified about a Snapchat video that Paul sent him around 7 p.m. that night that briefly shows Murdaugh wearing long pants and a short-sleeve shirt. Completely different clothing that he was wearing when officers arrived at the murder scene. Judge Newman closed the evening session by saying that court resumes at 9:30 a.m. and on Thursday, he would formally rule on the admissibility of the boat crash case and Murdaugh's alleged financial crimes as they pertain to a possible motive for the killings. Murdaugh is facing more than 100 criminal charges, mostly financial in nature. Earlier in the evening, Colleton County Sheriff's Office Sergeant Dathan Varnado testified that he administered the gunshot residue kit to Murdaugh's hands the night of the killing. While the results of the test were not discussed Wednesday, Varnado testified that when he gave Murdaugh the test, his hands and shirt appeared clean from blood. Murdaugh had told authorities that he rolled Paul and Maggie's bodies over to check for a pulse when he reportedly found them dead, but prosecutors have offered evidence that both bodies were surrounded by and largely covered by blood, striking doubt at another of Murdaugh's claims to police. Day 2 of the testimony from SLED cell phone forensic expert Lieutenant Britt Dove revealed a great deal of data, and the prosecution had not put most of the pieces together for the jury yet, but it is coming clear who the last people Maggie and Paul communicated with before being gunned down at their Colleton County home June 7, 2021. According to the cellular extraction reports and Dove's testimony, the last text that Maggie ever read on her phone was a family group text from Lynn G., likely her sister-in-law, Lynn Goatee, at 8:44. That text was about visiting Murdaugh's ailing father, Randolph Murdaugh III. The last phone call Paul appeared to make was to his friend, Rogan Gibson, a FaceTime call of 11 seconds, at around 8:44 p.m. that night. Other than the face of his mother and his killer, it might have been the last image of a face he saw. There were no more outgoing calls from Paul, recorded or answered calls ever, says the prosecution. The last message Paul ever read was from Megan Kimball, around 8:48, and it was about watching sad movies. Prosecutors believe Paul was killed around 8:50 p.m., and Maggie soon after. Questions remain, however. There is a roughly 1-hour gap in cell phone activity on Alex's phone from 8:05 to roughly 9 p.m. Was he taking a nap, as he stated in a previous alibi, or did he turn his phone off during the time the crimes were committed? There was also evidence and testimony revealing that someone, likely Murdaugh, deleted calls from his call log, showing calls to Maggie's phone log records, the calls. In cross-examination, defense attorney Phil Barber questioned the accuracy of the evidence and testimony, and questioned why data on Maggie's phone and Alex's phone did not match if the state claims he was indeed there and committed the murders. Cell phone data dominated the discussion on Tuesday afternoon in the Alex Murdaugh double murder trial. The state called John Bedingfield, Murdaugh's second cousin, who is a SC Department of Natural Resources officer and a custom gunmaker. Bedingfield testified that between 2016 and 2018, he custom-built 3-style rifles in .300 blackout caliber to fill special orders from Murdaugh. 2 of the guns were fitted with slings and thermal scopes, but one of those guns went missing, Murdaugh said. A .300 blackout caliber weapon was used to kill Maggie Murdaugh, and several blackout cartridges were found at the scene of the murders, which matched, in several ways, to other rifle cartridges found around the Murdaugh estate, leading prosecutors to suggest that Maggie was killed with a family weapon. The state then called Lieutenant Britt Dove, a supervisor at SLED's Compute Crimes Division, a member of the U.S. Secret Service and FBI Computer Forensics Task Forces. Dove was qualified by the court to testify as a cell phone forensic expert. Dove testified that he extracted cellular data from phones belonging to Alex, Maggie, and Paul Murdaugh using 2 methods, then verified the accuracy of those results using a third method. While questioning Dove, Assistant SC Attorney General John Conrad entered into evidence the full file system data from Maggie's phone, data which was stored on an external hard drive, so investigators could analyze it without altering the data on the phone itself. This data included text messages, call logs, and physical updates of the phone, such as when the phone was turned from a landscape position to a portrait position, or when the display lights turned on, etc. Based on the data extracted, Dove testified that Maggie made her last phone call at 7:50 p.m. on the night of the murders, June 7, 2021. The records also showed 5 missed calls from Murdaugh. After that time, from 9:04 to 10:03 p.m. Murdaugh called 911 around 10:07 p.m. to report finding the bodies of Maggie and Paul. Dove also testified that the last text message Maggie read was from Lynn G., likely her sister-in-law, Lynn Murdaugh Goatee, Alex's sister, at 8:49 p.m. However, Dove testified The data suggested that someone held her phone in their hand at 8:54 p.m. and again at 9:06 p.m., without unlocking it, or answering any of several calls or texts. The SLED cell phone expert also testified that Maggie's phone showed physical activity by the user, or holder of the phone. 38 steps were taken at around 8:17 p.m., 43 steps at around 8:33 p.m., and 59 steps at 8:53 p.m. Maggie's phone remained locked, however, and showed no further activity, until SLED agents found it beside the road, the next day, roughly a quarter to a half mile away.